Make their way up to your spot at the table, and while they're doing that, I want to remind you that at your tables you've got notepads of paper donated by JC Press. We haven't mentioned that at the past ones, but thank you to JC. And pens. If you have questions for the candidates, jot them down there and hold them up so I can see you, and we'll gather those. We anticipate a lot of questions from the audience. We already have several that have come in, and Jeffrey will do a good job of trying to get to as many of those as we can. I also wanted to take just a quick second to apologize. I know in some of our communications there was confusion over which date this forum was going to be and which candidates were going to be here. We'll make sure that we clear that up in the future. We appreciate our candidates being here today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator today, Jeffrey Jackson with the Owatonna People's Press. Jeffrey.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me okay? A little bit difficulty? I will do my best to make myself heard. We again would like to welcome everyone here this afternoon to the Candidates Forum for the state legislature. And here are the rules, and we'll jump right into the forum and the questions themselves. Here are the rules. No question has been provided for any of the candidates in advance. The candidates will be given two minutes for an opening statement. Then candidates will alternate responses to each question and will be allowed 1 minute for each question. Our timer, Sharon West, will hold up a yellow card like that to tell you that you have 30 seconds left. She will then hold up a red card to tell you that your time is up. And I will cut you off. I guarantee it. So with that in mind, we shall begin, Ms. Jensen, with you and your opening statement.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, People's Press, and to the Owatonna Chamber of Commerce, and to the Noon Rotary for holding this event and inviting me here today. I have to say, by the time the election comes around, I think I will have attended 15 of these events put together by groups that are very interested in hearing from the candidates, and I look at each one of them as an opportunity to have a conversation and to try to answer some of your questions. I'm Vicki Jensen. I'm a wife and a mother. My husband and I have an independent insurance agency located south of town here, right next to Sherwin-Williams and Sister Salon. I'm running for state senate because I've been actively working on issues that impact the people that live in this district, and I want to take that passion, knowledge, and experience to the state. I serve on the Owatonna School Board because I believe in public education, and I believe we must find lifelong learning opportunities if we're going to stay competitive. I serve as Secretary-Treasurer of Steele County Farmers Union because I understand and have a personal and professional commitment to the industry and believe that we must save the family farm in order to stay economically viable. I serve as the Minnesota Legislative Chair of the Minnesota Businesswomen because I value diversity and I believe we must have a voice in the policies that affect our lives. And finally, I served on the Board of Directors and as Public Policy Chair at the Chamber of Commerce because I believe that we must strengthen small business, small local business, in order to provide growth and find the growth and the opportunities for the people that live in our district. I look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Swedin.
Thank you all for being here. It's a great turnout. That's great to see. Thank you, the Noon Rotary, People's Press, and the Chamber of Commerce. We're pleased to be here. My name is Vern Swedin. I'm running for District 24 Senate. And the reason I'm doing that is because every person in life gets the opportunity to serve. And this was one of those opportunities in my life to do something that really matters for people in the district that I care so much about. My wife Darcy and I have been married 20 years now. We have 2 children in the Owatonna High School, one in junior high, one in high school. And this was an important calling to do something that really matters because I believe we need a leadership bias in the Senate that can come together and focus on things that are common threats to Minnesota. And when I watched government and politics from the sidelines, I thought to myself, why can 67 people not come to an agreement and understand what's really important? Why can't that be first? So our whole campaign is built on priorities. First things first, we want to shrink government. We want to make certain that we don't spend more than we have. We want to make certain that 67 people can come to an agreement together and know what the common threats are to Minnesota and to our families. They say that if your neighbor loses their job, it's a recession. If you lose your job, it's a depression. And I want to focus on good paying local jobs, and I want to make certain that we are always doing the right thing and keeping priorities first. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
Good afternoon. Check. Wow. There we go. Try that. There we go. Once again, thank you to the People's Press, the Chamber, and the Rotarians here for inviting us here to this opportunity to visit with you and talk about the things that are important. I'm Craig Brendan. I'm from Waseca, where my wife, Karen, and I live with our son, Jacob, who's, well, he's not living with us now. He's in the Marine Corps serving in Okinawa. And our daughter, Kirsten, who will be graduating this spring from Waseca High School. I'm a farm boy, knowing about agriculture, grew up that way in west central Minnesota, and have those values that are instilled upon me by my father and my grandparents, knowing the right things to do with doing with what you have, not with what you don't have, making things work with the things you have. That's one of the ideals that was instilled upon me. I've been teaching for the last 19 years now in Minnesota. I served 30 years with the National Guard, with one deployment in Iraq underneath my belt, and learned there that working together and making things happen is the key. Having a vision for your objective and making it work. I believe in the 3 C's. Stronger communities are built through communication and cooperation. Cooperation being the key word. When we work together, there's nothing that we cannot accomplish in our district, in our cities, and our state. The gridlock that we have observed in the past has stymied us, has brought us down. We need to look at things that are going to be beneficial for all of us across the state. We need to take the best ideas from everybody, spread them on the table, put them together, and work out something that's going to be beneficial for all the citizens of the state of Minnesota. That's my goal, and that's my wish for all of us here.
Thank you. Mr. Petersburg.
Thank you, and I thank you for all of you to attending this event. I see a lot of smiling faces out there. I see a lot of faces that I know and recognize, and I just appreciate the support that's been given me. My name is John Petersburg, and I'm running for Minnesota House District 24A, Owatonna and Waseca. And one of the reasons why I'm running is because of the district itself and how it has been beneficial to me in my life and has supported me in my life. A little bit of background about myself. I am also a farm boy. I grew up on a farm north of Claremont and have farmed myself for 15 years. Recently, and currently, I'm the church administrator at Trinity Lutheran Church, and I've been there for 15 years. I've been an area resident all my life, either at Claremont or currently now I'm in Waseca, but I've always been a member of Trinity, and I know Owatonna as well as any other town that I know. I've worked in Owatonna for many years prior to that as well. But getting back to service, we all want to serve this district. We all want to do what we can to improve the economy, to improve life around us. But we also want to do it in a way that is comprehensive and worthwhile long-term as well. Cooperation and being able to get along is certainly a valuable insight and something that we all want to do, but we also have to be able to do it. We have to be able to know how to do it. As a church administrator, you can understand the politics that goes on at a church. Sometimes I've said I want to be part of legislature because it might be easier. We've learned how to be able to be inclusive and bring us all together and really grow in what we're doing. And so that's what I bring to the table, that experience. Thank you.
Thank you. What we will be doing as we give the candidates the questions is I will group them so that the candidate who is opposing, or the two opposing candidates will get to give their answers together. So Mr. Petersburg and Mr. Brendan, you are running for 24A. We will begin the questions with you, Mr. Petersburg. A difficult economy continues to take its toll on business, residents, and government. How will you, as a state senator or a state representative, find ways to create more efficiency in state government? Mr. Petersburg.
What kind of is contrary to the whole question. The efficiencies of government and the growth of business sometimes are counterproductive from each other. In other words, what I'm saying is that sometimes government likes to stand in the way of business. I've always believed that if you want to see how healthy a community is, look at the business climate. And sometimes government actually stands in the way. My belief is that we've got to get government out of the way. We've got to let entrepreneurs and those that can grow the economy the opportunity to do so. So certainly shrinking the government is important, and then we also need to look at you around the tables there. Together we can accomplish a lot, and it's going to require all of us working together and not necessarily looking for government.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
Once again, it's about cooperation. You know, you look at what we have to sit down and think about, talk to our neighbors, talk to the people that we work with and visit with about the things that are going to make things more efficient. What is there that we can do to erase the duplicity of things in our government? Streamlining things, making them more efficient, sharing responsibilities between township, county, city, those ideas, make things work together is one of the keys that I want to look at. By becoming more efficient, we can maximize the monies that we have that will enable our small businesses to go forward and look at things, reduce the duplicity of regulations so that they can have the opportunity to make the decisions that they need to make that'll endure for their business and their climates going forward at this time. So making sure that we have things that are going to work for everybody across the board.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Swedeen.
So 1 minute or less, two-part question. So the first part being, 7 out of 10 people work for small businesses. So where are the incentives for small businesses? We've employed about 100 people over in Rochester, Minnesota, where I was the president for about 13 years. And Job Z stimulated that growth. So by encouraging, create a job, create tax incentives, because incentives can only come from economic growth. So simply by giving people things, it doesn't create the growth. So the second part of it is systems are the answer. We've aggregated 11 databases for information. We need to start creating systems and automation that actually does create efficiencies, that is accountable to the people paying the taxes.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen.
Yes. Okay, the first thing that we need to take is
I
another.
don't believe you're on.
Is it
Start the
working now?
time over though?
In regards to finding efficiencies in government, we need to take a look at how we do our rulemaking and the regulations at the government, as well as what the legislature is doing. Most of the inefficiencies that come out come from the agency side of the government, and we need to take a look at that. I worked on the City Efficiency Task Force here in Owatonna, and we were able to form a partnership between private and public, and it had to be a partnership in order to make that work. So if we want to find efficiencies in government, which I know we can do because we did it here, we need to make sure we make those relationships and build those things so that we can work together, because that's the only way that this is going to happen.
Thank you. Mr. Swedeen, we'll start the next question with you. The question concerns Highway 14. Everybody's favorite topic, I'm sure.
It's only been going 40 years.
Yeah. How will you be effective in forwarding the efforts to complete Highway 14? Mr. Swedeen.
First things first, it would be important to bring both Minnesota Department of Transportation agencies together, both Mankato and Rochester, and have them come together to have an influential conversation, find out what the importance is. We have double the rate of deaths on that road from Dodge Center to Owatonna. They need to understand the importance of that, the mere fact that it hasn't been completed for 40 years, and I know there's people in this room that have labored to complete that. I drove that road for 13 years, so I know how dangerous it is. And the first priority is getting people to come to the understanding that it is important, and if we don't finish it now, at $190 million, 20 years from now, what would it look like? $400 million? Create the investment now, finish what they've started.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen.
To complete highway,
Is it working again? Okay, great. To complete Highway 14, there have been a lot of really good people working on this issue, and I know it's been out there for a long time. But I also understand that the way that we work in Minnesota is that everybody has roads, everyone has safety issues, and everyone is important to that area. So what we need is representation and legislators that are able to be a strong voice for their particular district. Because when you go up there, it's a competition, and we have to try to make sure that we work together with other partnerships, like the Highway 14 partnership. They have somebody that's a representative up there. You work with them, you work with the communities, and you work with current legislators, because you are in a competition to try to make this happen. So we need to make sure that the tax dollars that they're collecting to go for infrastructure is absolutely happening in this district, and that's what I would advocate for, and that's what I would work for.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
Well, what we need to do is get a consensus across the border from Rochester to New Ulm. A unified voice is the key to making this happen. We need strong vocal leadership from District 24A and the surrounding districts to go up to the legislature, up to the Twin Cities, and say, hey, Highway 14 is vital for the economic security of our area. The goods and services that run across our area are key to us. They will improve our business climate, our farm climate, our agricultural climate, but we need to have people that are willing to say, rural Minnesota, outstate Minnesota is equally as important as the metro area. We need to have the voice that will fight and talk about the things that are important to our livelihood and our future, because our future is tied to what goes up to the Twin Cities. And when we're strong here, the metro area and the state will be strong.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Petersburg.
Well, you probably noticed, I've been living along Highway 14 all my life. And that means almost all my life, it's been in the process of becoming a 4-lane road. So the reality is that there's a strong voice representing this particular area. And all of the things that we've done up to the past, obviously, haven't been successful. Otherwise, we've been completed. So how I go about decision making is finding out all of the people that have potential of helping a particular project, going to them and trying to figure out ways in which we can all work together. One of the things that we can do is, rather than talk about this being a regional issue, how can we convince people in the cities and others that this is a statewide issue as well? That the economic growth in greater Minnesota has as big a stake for people in the metro area as it does down here. If we work with everybody and we start thinking about it a little bit differently, we can be successful. But
thank you, sir. Thank you. We are going to be jumping into the questions now that come from our audience, and I would remind you that if you do have a question, to write it on a piece of paper, and Brad Meyer will be glad to pick those up and bring them up to me. And there will be some questions that we will kind of rework a little bit, but we do want to get these questions up to everyone, or up to our candidates. Mr. Brendan, we are going to begin the next question with you. All of you have indicated that you want to work together. How do you do that? Do you have an approach? And along with that question, we are going to add another question, a scenario for you. You find yourself at odds with the party line. What do you do in that situation?
Well, one of the things I learned in the military, my 30 years in the military, is that when you have a objective, you bring your best minds together, You bring your best minds together, you sit down, and you have a plan for where you're going to go. What do you do then? You step your way back, you're taking one step at a time to where we are today. And we start building from that process, the broad base, and working up a 2-year or a 3-year plan until we reach that objective. While we're going on that road up to our objective, we continually tweak, modify, refine, and work to make better our goal, to get to achieve our goal. As far as working with, going against the party line, it's not the party that's important, it's the people. The people are the important part. What are we doing to take care of the people? And that's first, the thing I always will remember. Mission first, people always. The objective is the important part, but if we don't engage the people and have them buy into it, where will we be?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Petersburg.
When you try to build consensus, one of the things that you have to do is you have to have everybody at least approaching the table with a fairly open mind without decision making. One of my primary skills, I believe, is coming to every discussion with an open mind. In other words, I listen first, then we have an opportunity to discuss and explore all the options, and then we decide. It's what works well at church. It's what I've learned over the last 20-some years, and how we really generate consensus building and having people on the same boat because no one's threatened. In regards to party lines, that's always a discussion, but you go into it the same way. You try to convince others of your direction. I stood up for what I believed before when I was on the school board over at Claremont, and the following year I was defeated. I'm not afraid to make that stand. I'm not afraid to say, if that's the will it needs to be, that's fine. If you don't like it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. The way that I do this and the way that I approach policy in general, and I've been working, like I said, on policy regarding issues that happen in this district. First thing that I look at is, what is the policy intending to do? Do we want it to do that? Do we think it will do that? And how do we make it better? So if you want to find consensus and try to build around that, the thing that you concentrate on is how do you make it better. There are always policy things that you can add that will make that policy better and probably work more towards what you're intending to do in the first place. So I agree with the open-minded, but to have the understanding that your role is always going to be to make it better, no matter which party represents that bill, writes that bill, brings it to the conference committee, whatever's happening, you always have to keep in mind the people in the district and what you can do and what you can offer to move that forward in a way that you believe in, plus finding something that's going to make it better.
Thank you. Mr. Swedeen.
Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And having a leadership bias when you approach anything, whether it's your party or not, having a leadership bias makes the priorities first. When people come in and they have an important list of items, focusing on what the priorities are first typically creates consensus. And consensus really is built for the people that you represent. It needs to be fair and equitable. And at times, there's agendas, so finding out what those agendas may be and figuring out if those are fair and equitable. Sometimes you have to better understand, create a solution with consensus, and actually understand it in a way that is fair and equitable for everyone else, and then be the leader that's called to be in your Senate to do the right things, always.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen, we're going to begin the next question with you. And we're going to combine a couple of questions from the audience here, questions about education. Recognizing that quality education is something that can be leveraged for economic development, what can be done at the state level to assist schools in meeting their financial needs? And what is your solution for education to get back its funding from the state?
Well, our school system, our education system is definitely underfunded, and that has gone back to when the state first decided to take over the funding. They took the money that they had and they divided it between the number of schools in the state, and then they were going to pass a sales tax that was going to make up the difference for what it actually cost. The legislature at that time did not pass that sales tax. So fortunately, we've had a surplus in prior years and we're able to borrow from the general fund in order to pay for that. Now we're in a time of economic downturn. We don't have that luxury or that availability. But we have to make sure that we keep that solemn promise that's on our state constitution. The one thing that we're going to fund is education. So legislators have to make sure that we're looking at that funding formula and trying to make this work, because it is the one thing that is on our constitution that we have to do. I believe that there is a way to do this, but legislators have to have the will, the courage, and the determination to make that happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Swedin.
We read a lot about the shifts to our schools. Right now, we've borrowed about $2.4 billion from the school systems. Removing the shift or reducing that in something that's more equitable, because too much time and energy and too many debt services are going back to the school to actually manage that. So where the government seems to borrow or can borrow money, they do. So removing that removes some of the burden and the debt services that support that. Secondly, reducing mandates and letting districts do what they know what needs to be done locally is the first step to actually efficiencies. So getting those people the right information from the state, yes, we do have to fund it. It's mandated by the Constitution. We need to do it in a way that we can't borrow later. We've gotten ourselves into trouble there, and we need to quit.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
Well, we know that the $2.4 billion that was borrowed from our schools is going to take time to be repaid. We need to look at ways to find fair and stable funding to take care of that aspect, but also be looking into the future. Where are we going to go? How are we going to provide that? Here again, we have to start with take our best minds, put them together, get a consensus of what is our goal, where we're going to go. I visited with Tom Sager and Superintendent Brian Dietz in Owatonna and Waseca respectively, and the borrowing of the money, $3.5 and $5.5 million in Waseca, and the $8.1 million borrowed here in Owatonna, created a debt load on our systems. Those translate in about 1.5 teaching positions in each school. We need to make sure we don't have those monies going against what our schools are able to do. Let the local control happen. Let the people know.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Petersburg.
Well, repaying back the shift is real easy. We just take the money from something else. But it's not that easy when you really boil down to it. Right now, Minnesota is 42nd in largest taxation states in the United States. In other words, we receive our tax freedom day 41 states after everybody else. April 22nd this year. So we've got plenty of taxation out there. Now it's figuring out how do we spend those dollars. And we also need to look at the school system, which is our priority. Absolutely priority. Children are not really our future, they are our present. And we need to think about that investment is today. So how we go about spending that money is twofold. One, we need to generate some more revenue of some sort for them to be able to fund it. We also need to cut back on what the requirements are that they have to also fund. Help them on the expense side as well.
Thank you. Mr. Petersburg, still hang on to that microphone for just a second. We're going to continue with an education question. Minnesota is one of only 11 states that requires school districts to base teacher layoffs solely on seniority without consideration of teacher effectiveness. In 2011, Governor Dayton signed a law directing all school districts to provide annual evaluations for teachers, beginning in the 2014-15 academic year. This statewide teacher evaluation system is under development, but there is no requirement in state law that the results of the evaluations will be used to retain effective teachers and to lead to improved teacher quality. Do you support legislation that would require using teacher performance as a factor in determining teacher layoffs and not base layoffs solely on seniority? If so, why? If not, why not?
Yes, I do support a combination of both. Back when I was on the school board, we used to hear about stories in which when you use tenure only, That means that if a person has a degree or a license in more than one area, they may be even going to an area in which they prefer not to teach. And the problem is that there needs to be some protection for continuity, for quality teachers to stay in place. We need to abide by the contracts that everybody has agreed to and developed. But we also need to understand that there are very good beginning first and second and third year teachers that are also very good. And to say, I'm sorry, just because you haven't been here long enough, even though you might be better qualified or have better performance than somebody else, you can't stay, probably isn't the most productive for us. And I think it's something that we need to review, and I think we need to really look into how we combine both.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan?
Well, I know that being a teacher, that the word tenure creates great angst amongst everybody. Tenure is not a teacher issue. Tenure is an administrative issue. The administrator's job is to make sure they mentor and follow up on teacher improvement, seeing how they work and how they grow. And that's where it comes into the tenure side of it. Seniority side, I've seen firsthand that not all teachers who have seniority get to stay in that job. We just have people that were cut because of their licensure and where they were at and the needs of the school district. They were temporarily laid off because that's the way the system worked. So when you look at it, there are things in place where it works, but it comes down to when we talk about tenure, it's an issue that has to be a paper trail that needs to be followed and worked with through the administration.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Swedeen?
I do support the healthy evaluation process. Every good organization in the world effectively evaluates the performance of the people that serve. And we need the very best of the very best teachers. Ask yourself the question, who is your favorite teacher as a kid? And I'll believe, or you will also believe, that they probably weren't really questioned on their performance because they were the best of the best. So having an evaluation system, 39 states have gone before us with a process like this. I think there's an opportunity to learn a lot from those states, find out what best worked for those states and implement that in Minnesota. And last in, first out just cannot be the primary directive in good organizational management.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen?
Thank you. I guess I'm a little confused with that answer, since your previous answer stated we need to remove some of the mandates from our education system and let the local people decide how they want to do that. I have concerns as a school board member that if we do these types of policies, we're going to put undue or unfunded things that school boards are actually going to have to try to implement. We're not training our teachers the way we should. We're not providing a lot of things that's underfunded in that respect. I'm also concerned from a business standpoint. There are a lot of businesses that have huge human resource departments. You look at the school districts, they probably have 1 or 2 people within that department, and they're expected to carry out and do this. So if we're going to have an evaluation system, which I believe in, it should not be penalizing, it should not be punitive, it should be encouraging and a way to opportunity to help teachers, to get the best teachers in the classroom, because that's what we all want. We all want that, but we have to make sure that the policies that we're writing and putting forth can be carried out.
Thank you. Thank you. When Brad Meyer handed me this question from the audience, he said to me, well, let's go ahead and get right into the controversy. So shall we? Mr. Swedeen, the marriage amendment has exposed a religious divide between Lutherans and Catholic religious leaders and within religious leaders of many different communities. It has increased religious tension to the highest level in more than half a century. What is your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the marriage amendment? Mr. Swedeen.
So I work in our local church, and I manage outreach. And one of the conversations that come up, even in our pastors' luncheons and conversation, is the marriage amendment. I do support the marriage amendment because what it is, it's about definition. It's not we live in America. This is a land of freedoms, and I do believe that civil unions are fine, but to redefine marriage seems a little overboard. So when we have these open conversations together as pastors and leaders in this community, we find out we're all saying the same things, but defining marriage, redefining marriage is not the key to creating civil rights. It's simply not.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. I guess this is such a personal issue, and that's why you see the divisions that you do, not just within religious areas, but, you know, everyday life. I will tell you that I'm confused by why we're putting something that takes away rights on the Constitution. As an individual, I can say I would never want to deny the relationship that I have with my husband from another person. But from a legislative standpoint, I worry about moving forward with these kinds of things. It actually appears like we're not trying to write good legislation. We're just trying to promote agendas or ideas that we hold. And I'm not saying it's not important, or it's not personal, or it's not something that we shouldn't talk about and have those conversations. But as a legislator, I would not want to put something on the Constitution that we can't come together and do legislatively, especially when it comes to people's rights.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
I agree with Vicki. Our Constitution, federal and state, says we need to protect the rights of the people. That is the #1 thing that our Constitution should be doing. It should not be restricting rights for people. It should be looking to expand them. The discussion about marriage, I can't believe that we would even look at putting on a constitutional amendment, particularly when we have a state statute that already says we can't do it. Things that restrict the rights of individuals put us in a backwards mode, going backwards, taking a step back. We should be looking at taking a step forward with the people in our state, making sure that everybody has equal opportunities across the board.
Thank you. Mr. Petersburg.
I'll start right by saying, yes, I support the marriage amendment, and contrary to what we've heard earlier, legislative did pass this. That's why it's defined in the law as marriage is between man and woman. And so therefore, under that direction, I guess it's appropriate for us to put it in the Constitution as well, since legislatively we've already done that. But my question is I think there are very few people out there that do not have their mind made up. I think it's a very personal opinion that we all have. And if we live in a society that agrees in democratic rule, then let's take it off of the ballot, or not the ballot, but take it off of legislation that occurs all the time, the debate that occurs and really bogs us down. Let the people vote, let the people decide, and then from that point on, we'll develop the legislation that really is important for this particular state.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan, we will begin the next question with you. Minnesota's prevailing wage is calculated based on surveys submitted to the Department of Labor and Industry, also known as DOLI, on an annual basis. At present, DOLI sets the prevailing wage using the mode, that is, the wage that appears most frequently. There are those who say that the mode tends to be a costlier way for taxpayers to finance state-funded construction projects and does not reflect all of the wages surveyed. And there are those who also say that a fairer calculation would be the mean or the average of the wages surveyed. Do you favor reform of prevailing wage laws to reflect average wages instead of the current system that looks for the most frequently occurring wages? If so, why? If not, why not? Mr. Brendan.
Well, I think what I would first do is look at, take the highest and lowest, throw them out, and take that average in the middle. What does that do? It provides economic impact for the employers. It still is able to provide an economic means for the employee, for the worker out there to make a good living and be able to spend those dollars back in their communities to keep our economy moving. But looking at throwing out the top and the bottom and taking that average in the middle would help us boost our creativity for construction and everything that goes along with that, and gives us an opportunity to look at how we can define and make things better for all of us across the board.
Thank you. Mr. Petersburg.
Just as a point of clarification, I think you started out by saying the minimum wage, and I think what you're really referring to is prevailing wage.
I'm sorry, if I said minimum wage, I do apologize. I thought I said prevailing wage, but
It is something where contractors and those that public entities have to use when they are determining the costs and budgeting for the projects that are out there. And the mode being just the middle salary, rather than the average, doesn't take into account the varying swings that can occur depending on region. So I very much in support of going to an average wage as well. I think that's more productive, it certainly is more efficient, and I think it really is beneficial to everybody concerned, including taxpayers.
sorry, I think we had visitors there.
You're disagreeing.
Ms. Jensen.
Yes, thank you. This question comes up quite frequently through the chamber and my work at public policy. We're all concerned about what we can do to ensure and strengthen small businesses. I am as well. But when it comes to this question about prevailing wage, we have to be honest, I believe, about the conversation and what it actually means. And I absolutely agree that we need to take a look at all the formulas that we deal with in the state of Minnesota. That's how we generate revenue, that's how we do most of the things we do. Education's a formula, you know, so I'm open to looking at it. I haven't seen the kind of evidence that I would need to support doing that. So at this point, I'm absolutely open to looking at it and to make sure that businesses are able to do what they need to do. But we have to make sure too that we're not making changes that end up hurting the people that are doing the job too. And I would make sure that we look at both, because we can do that. We don't have to pick one side over the other.
Thank you. Mr. Swedin.
The prevailing wage cost, it does affect project costs in whole. And in a free capital market, I mean, our best of the best is to find average wage costs within regions to maintain the most competitive, and there's probably some efficiency dollars in there. So I'd like to see some information that would allow us to look at what projects are being funded at prevailing wage, what would that look like under the new mean formula, and find out if there's actually efficiency in there, because we only have so much money to spend and we have to do it right. So I do support it.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen, we're going to begin the next question with you.
Okay.
And candidates, I'm going to give you 3 statements. And I want you to tell me which of these statements best reflects your position on business taxes, and then just talk about it for the remaining minute that you have. Here are the 3 statements. Minnesota business taxes are too low. Minnesota business taxes are too high. Or Minnesota business taxes are about right. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. As a business owner, I would say they're too high. As a citizen of the state of Minnesota, living in a state that I believe is a very special place, ranked number 5 in the latest Gallup poll as one of the best places to live in the future, I believe that everyone wants that place to be special. In order to do that, we have to pay some taxes. In order to fund our education system, we have to pay some taxes. I understand the question and why it's worded the way that it is, because what it does is it makes us think about, should we be removing taxes from business? I think we should if we can. The question that you have to ask your legislator is, what are they going to put as their priorities on what they're going to fund with those taxes? Are they going to be honest with it? Are they going to work really hard to make sure that those tax dollars are giving you the best return on the investment that they can make, so that you know that you have the services that you've come to love and respect and enjoy in this district? So that's my answer.
Thank you. Mr. Swedin.
Well, it sounds a lot like a Goldilocks story. This bed's just right, this bed's too hard, but we're ranked number 50th in the Small Business and Entrepreneurial Index in the United States. Dead last against Washington, D.C., which is 66 square miles surrounded by reality. So having the tax base at ranked 50th, I believe there is opportunity to bring down, and I'm not saying that we need to be first, but I believe that we should be ranked somewhere in the middle. The competitiveness that's that's taking place. Jobs, people talk about jobs moving overseas. Jobs move over borders locally, and we need to be more competitive with that. And again, having the ability to create good paying local jobs increases revenues by being more competitive. So I think it kind of takes care of itself if we focus on the right thing, which is the priorities.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan?
Well, nobody wants to see their taxes raised. We all agree about that. The thing is for the taxes that we pay, what is the return that we get in that investment? What are the real dollars that come back to us? You know, when I look at what I receive, with the things that we receive across the state, school funding, welfare for the people of the state of Minnesota, the good for the good of the people, those tax dollars that come back from the taxes that we pay are a fair and equitable amount that goes to service all of us. We need to look at efficiencies. Maybe we can reduce some of the business taxes and still be able to create those opportunities for individuals, but you need to examine the return of the tax dollars that you pay out. Is it benefiting us as a state, benefiting the people of Minnesota? That's how you look at it. That's how you realize the maximum effectiveness of our tax system.
Thank you. Mr. Petersburg?
No question, our business taxes are too high. If you heard some of the comments earlier, for this question, Minnesota is a good place to live. It is one of the healthiest. We used to have one of the best education systems that we will soon have again. No question in my mind about that. And yet, we have businesses leaving Minnesota. It's only for one reason, and that's because they can't afford to stay here. And as good as the state is, if companies can't stay here, we lose the jobs. If we lose the jobs, we lose the economy. So we can't afford to have the taxes that we're doing now. Whether or not we think they are beneficial to us or not, we can't. As I said earlier, if you want to know the health of the community, look at the health of businesses. We have to find some ways of relieving that tax. I've talked to 2 individual companies that said if they could afford to sell right now, they would leave because of the taxation. Thank you.
Thank you. While we're on the subject of taxes, Mr. Petersburg, we're going to ask a specific question about a specific tax, and you will go first, Mr. Petersburg. Under what circumstances should the state consider removing the sales tax exemption from clothing sales? Mr. Petersburg.
When we're in statutory operating debt about ready to drown. I think, again, the situation is that this, taking the taxation exemption off of clothing and food increases taxes. That means ultimately it increases the cost of everything that you buy in those 2 particular areas, and that increases your overall taxes. As I said earlier, we're 41st or 42nd in the amount of taxes that we pay here in the state of Minnesota, and I don't think that's the proper way of balancing the budget. If I was a little boy and had an allowance, obviously I would like to go to my dad when I wanted more money and say, can't you give me more money? But he said, no, you've got to learn how to spend your money wisely. You need to know how to be able to save it. We need to be disciplined here in dealing with our expenses first before we think anything about increasing revenue, because an improving economy does generate additional revenue.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
When you look at placing taxes on clothing and items like that, where does that really start to hurt us? It starts to hurt us in the low-income people, the middle to low-income people, because they are not able to go out and purchase the things that they need, the clothing they need to live in our state. You know, that is an issue that I hold very dear, because looking at the schools where I work, where I see that every day, you see the children come to school with some of them less and less every year. They don't have that opportunity, and to be able to have a raise in taxes, we've just lowered the ability for the families to purchase some of the essential items that they are needed in their day-to-day lives. Is that the right thing to do for our children and for their future? No, I don't think so.
Thank you. Mr. Swedien.
We don't have an income problem in the state of Minnesota. Again, we're ranked 50th in that climate with business. I do not believe that removing the exemption for sales or removing the exemption would be a good thing for Minnesotans. It would just allow us to spend more. So first we need to figure out what do we spend our money on? Is it the right thing? And this is a need. Clothing hits that hierarchy of needs in our lives. My wife and I were in Colorado last year, and we found that one of the first comments we made, we went out shopping for something, and my wife noticed right away, they tax your clothes here. I mean, it's important. It hits your home budget. It increases costs there. So we need to fix the spending problem.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. I think these are the types of questions that really demonstrate how hard it is going to be, whoever's elected, to go up to the state. When you make generic explanations for what you want to do on tax, depending on who you're talking about, it affects everybody. We need to look at tax, total tax reform, comprehensive tax reform. You can't just pick certain things, one or the other. You need to take a look at it in whole. That entrepreneurial index that we've been hearing so much about, what it does, I looked at it, it ranks your top tax brackets and only looks at tax. So yeah, we do have tax, but we also make money and we do other things. So the index that I was looking at has to do with our quality of life, whether we have access to healthcare, access to jobs, access to education, all those kinds of things we want in the state of Minnesota. There's a reason that we have 5 million people living in the state of Minnesota. Whether you're a business owner or you're looking for work, you love to live in Minnesota because we are trying to do the things that give us a better life.
Thank you. Mr. Sweeney, we'll begin the next question with you, and this concerns the state budget. The state collects revenue, LGA and school funding, for redistribution to cities, counties, and school districts. What is your position on using designated funds to balance the state budget on the backs of cities, counties, and school districts? Mr. Sweeney.
Well, these programs were created for Greater Minnesota, so it impacts us if those were to go away, and that's where leadership does come in, because we need the strongest voices in southern Minnesota that can compete with the metro markets to make certain that those dollars do come back into our markets. Without that, Faribault, for instance, does not have certain local property taxes because of Shattuck and because of the blind school. There's certain taxes they don't collect, so not having access to the LGA funds would be detrimental to that market greatly. In the small markets, the smaller communities, we need to make certain that those dollars do come back.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. Local government aid was a program started because Minnesota wanted to make sure there wasn't disparity among different cities and different areas of the state. It was a decision that was made so that the people living there could have access to basic services. We do need to take a look at how we're distributing it, but we're still collecting the tax that they instituted in order to do the program. So you're paying a 3% tax that was meant to be redistributed. What happens if we get rid of and quit and eliminate local government aid to those cities that rely on those funds? I'm open to looking at all of those things, but we have to be honest with the people that live there and explain to them, if we do this, this is the impact that it's going to have on you. Just like when they removed the homestead, that market value homestead credit, it impacted us greatly. We needed to, fine, if we need to do that at the state, we need to come back to the people that live in the district and explain to them, this is what's going to happen. Your taxes will go up because we can't do this or that. Your taxes will go up if you...
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
Well, I think we've seen what's happened in our communities, local communities, when LGA is reduced. Services are curtailed, taken back. We need to make sure that the funding solution for LGA and services like that is fair and equitable across the state, for our police, for our fire, for our infrastructure in our communities. Developing fairness, looking at the tax code and developing a fair process that everybody is able to share in is the key to that. When we do that, we're going to be able to look at driving our local government entities forward, because they're going to have the monies that are there for them. To rob Peter to pay Paul is the wrong way to do it. We need to make sure we do it in an efficient and concise manner for betterment of all of us.
Thank you. Mr. Petersburg.
Our budget currently is a little over $30 billion, 34, I think, if my memory is correct. And that includes all the taxation, property tax, income tax, sales tax, license tax, all of those things. Of that, 40% is spent on schools and 40% is spent on human services. That leaves 20% left for all the other programs and agencies that we have. And of that, some of them are collected, as you heard, for special designated funds. It gets back down to discipline. If you don't have confidence and trust that the funds that are raised for the purpose are going to continue to be used there, it's devastating to people's level of trust and willingness to support it. And you have to be disciplined then in order to say, these are for that. That makes it difficult for us to be successful in balancing the budget because everybody looks at them and says, hey, can't we just use a little bit of that? We have to have somebody that
Thank you,
says
sir.
no.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan, we'll begin the next question with you. We're turning to health care now. The federal health care law requires states to establish health insurance exchanges by January 1st, 2014. If an exchange is not established, the federal government will operate a federal exchange in the state. What is your position on whether Minnesota should establish a health insurance exchange? Mr. Brendan.
Well, we're already on that path. We already have people working on developing that healthcare exchange, looking at the broad base of what is out there, the federal legislation, and bringing that in, and we have people that are already on the floor working to find something that works for Minnesotans. Works for Minnesotans. That's the key issue. Tailor it to our needs. Those people are developing the model that I believe will be the model for the rest of the country. If we get that in place quickly, as quick as possible, that it's going to have a least amount of impact on all of us across the state, we have the opportunity to shape nationally a healthcare idea that will go forward and be a benefit not only to the citizens of Minnesota, but across the nation. We've got that in place, they're working on it now, and I think they're making good progress in getting to that idea.
Thank you. Mr. Petersburg.
I have some concern over the current direction in which we are creating that exchange. If my understanding is correct, and I'm not an expert, my understanding is that organization, agency, group, commission that's creating those, it did not run through the legislature. The legislature, who is supposed to have the authority to do that, was bypassed. And so we don't know where that's going to lead to. We are kind of in that between a rock and a hard place. The time for creating those exchanges is coming up very quickly, and those that I've talked to with various insurance agencies and companies, one of them being here in town, they're not sure that they can even get their program ready by the deadline. So it's important for us to understand exactly what the ramifications are and try to make sense out of it.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. This is such an important issue for the state of Minnesota, not just the exchange, but healthcare in general. I absolutely believe that why would we want the federal government to come in and set up an exchange for us? That makes no sense to me. The state should take an active role, set one up. We've always been the most innovative when it comes to healthcare. We have the lowest cost, highest return for healthcare. So I think there were a lot of things that could have been done with the Affordable Care Act that included things in Minnesota, because we are so innovative and so proactive when it comes to the health of the people that live in this state. So yes, we should be helping out with this exchange. I know that people are worried about it and have concerns about the healthcare situation, but we should take an active role to make sure that we do it the best, because that's what we do.
Thank you. Mr. Swedeen.
So because of the Affordable Health Care Act, we are in mode already. In January 2013, there's already mandates on this, either federal or state exchange. State exchange being, of course, the lesser evil, the best to work with. My primary hope would be that the Affordable Health Care Act does get repealed, because there's 2,070 pages that people don't quite understand. The ramifications to businesses are going to be really concerning to those that are out there trying to make it work. And we need to go a new direction and there needs to be reformation, but we need to do it in a way, they've already added 30,000 more pages to support the Affordable Health Care Act. So I don't know what exchange is going to be caught up to speed to even take care of any of these things.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen, we're going to begin with you. Continuing on the question of health care, the question is, the Minnesota Nurses Association is advocating for the establishment of a nurse-patient ratio. What is your position on this idea?
Yeah, this is an issue that I spoke with several different organizations because I wanted to get a good handle on it. Because my main concern is for the patients within the state of Minnesota that are trying to maintain and get the health care that they need and deserve to have. When it comes to an issue like this, it's a labor issue. It's a labor issue, and it's something that isn't easily dealt with or talked about. I understand that hospitals need to have the ability to make those decisions when it comes to get best care for the patient. And I also understand that nurses are under a really, really heavy workload. And they work under very stressful conditions. They work on their feet, they work odd hours, and most of them are women. It's very detrimental to their health, and that can't be good for our patients either. So my position is that we need to take a look at how are we staffing, especially with the Affordable Care Act. I have deep concerns that we're not going to have the type of providers that we need.
Thank you. Mr. Swedini.
My niece just graduated from the registered nursing program, and that's one of her primary issues is the staffing relationship with the patients. Having enough time to make the best decisions is difficult in every scenario. Minnesota probably does it better than most, but the ratio will need to work. I mean, you have to do the math and make certain that it does work. These are people's lives at stake. And she's telling me right now, her name's Stacy, and Stacy's telling me right now that it's just so much to do, and you feel like your day is never done. Even when she goes home, she feels like, wow, there's so much more I should have been doing, but there's just not time to do that for allocation. So each area, each market will have to look at that ratio need and what services they provide, and it's going to be complex.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
Well, I think when you talk about an issue like this, you need to consider the people that are on the front line. You know, whether it be nurses, whether it be police, whether it be firefighters. Look at people in the front line that are doing the work. Get their input. Make sure that you take in consideration what's going on, what's happening. How can they provide the best service for the client, the patient in this case? You know, I'd be the last one to want to go to the hospital and say, oh, yeah, by the way, my nurse, you missed this for me. You missed this medication. They know they're working hard on their feet, day in, day out, long shifts, odd shifts. Make sure that management and the nurses get together and come up with a comprehensive plan that's going to make things better for the patient, and it'll make things better for the hospitals and for the nurses. But it's a tough question to go through. You have to sit down and iron it out. What's going to be best for the consumer? That's the number one thing. How is it going to affect that consumer?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Petersburg.
I spent a lot more time in the hospital the last 5-6 years than I have ever wanted to, through the ultimate death of my wife through lung cancer, and my mother, who's been in nursing care as well. And I can tell you the amount of work that they do. And it's really easy to pull this single issue out and say, hey, nurses are the backbone of what care is happening in hospitals. And shouldn't we have a ratio of some sort that mandates that? But we just had a discussion earlier that will impact directly that. That has to do with the healthcare initiatives and the other things. Nursing is part of the whole healthcare issue as well. And whatever impacts one is going to impact the other. And we need to look at this comprehensively and decide exactly what's the best. And for me, it's always, it generally is better to have those in local control make the decisions rather than government.
Thank you. Mr. Petersburg, a question from the audience. Riverland Community College is important for workforce and economic development in the region. As a legislator, how will you help support Riverland to ensure they receive the funding they need to enhance the access and quality of higher education available to Steele County residents? Mr. Petersburg.
That's a good question. It's part of the overall, again, educational mandates and requirements and support that we have, not only to technical and universities. And there's more and more industry that are saying now that we aren't getting the qualified, even college graduates, to deal with the skill levels that we need in industry, production, and so forth. Because so many people are going to four-year colleges that a two-year college like Riverland here is very much an important part of the economy, and I think it is a direction that we need to go. It's certainly going to be cheaper for the individual going to it as well. So I think we need to look again at that and see how that fits into the overall post-secondary education program.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
Well, our two-year community and technical colleges are a stepping stone for young people. It gives them a cost-effective way to get started in their education. As I know, I'm looking right now with my daughter. Cost-effectiveness for her education going forward this next year. What's going to be most cost-effective? We know that higher education has been cut year after year, and being efficient as they are, they're still putting out a good product, but they need to be able to have the resources available so they can be prepared to train the people in the types of jobs that we're looking at for the future. Industry jobs, nursing, things of that nature going forward, making sure they have those opportunities, but it also provides the opportunity for students to step from the two-year associate's degree into a four-year program at a much cheaper, cost-effective nature for those young people. And that's what we want to do. Less debt for our young people coming out of high school and going on to college, so they have a better opportunity to make a better life
Thank
for
you, sir.
themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Swedee.
Well, the first thing that I would do, I would advocate for those types of programs, because 83% of college graduates that graduate with a four-year degree do not go into the field they graduated in. And that's a lot of money, that's a lot of expense, whereas in the technical colleges and community colleges, they focus on trade and trade value. So a lot of those students come out with a good trade. They understand what they want to do. They have a lower dollar per dollar investment in their education that does become practical. And to advocate the school with the local businesses within our district and be that voice of how do we build that together, I think is one of the most important things we can do. And I do understand that it's 7.5% of our budget in the state. So it is important. We need to make certain that we advocate for the right things for kids as well.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen.
Higher education is one of the things that is very important to me. I have a daughter that's attending Winona State University. I have a son that's going to Rochester Technical College. Is there a big difference between the success of my two kids because they went to a two-year versus a four-year university? I don't think so. And I think that we have to, as a state, come to the consensus that it's all right for students to get a two-year degree. And being on the school board, we're faced with, we should bring in the community colleges. The reason we have the schedule that we do at the high school here in Owatonna is because those kids can take advanced classes and get a jump on being able to finish out their education, because we are the fourth highest debt load if you graduate in the United States. So we have to take a look at that as well. There's a lot of work that we can do here, but it starts with the kids at the lower level and trying to make sure that we encourage them to go find their passion and go ahead for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Swedee. Actually, candidates, I'd like you all to just answer this question by giving me the title. This is probably my favorite question that came from the audience today, by the way. Just give me the title. What book is on your bed nightstand? What book is on your nightstand? Mr. Swedee.
Several. The one I'm reading right now is called Tribes. It talks about how people work together and how people find areas of uniqueness that kind of support each other. And I've been told for years and years, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And knowing the tribe has been a fun book to read.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen?
I feel bad I don't remember the title. It's a woman resource book that I actually got from my daughter, who took a woman's in politics class at Winona State University, and I have been looking at it. I don't have much time to read beginning to end, so it's nice to have a resource book that I can open up and read briefly. But I don't, women's studies.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan?
Man, who has time to read at this time of year? But the book that I've been reading, and I like Vicki, I can't remember the title, but it talks about a young man who served in Iraq, and it's an biography, written by both the father and the son, talking about the struggles as the father gets the family started, the struggles that they went through, and the things that they did getting up to where his son took his life after having served our country. And it's a very personal account of a family and the things that they deal with. And this hits home to me after the things that I've been associated with in the past 5 to 6 years, is that those things that strike home are affecting the families and the struggle of the father and the son and how they struggle against each other, and that at the end reconciled right before the time of the son's suicide.
Thank you. Mr. Petersburg?
I'm going to answer your question directly. My wife and I, on our nightstand, have the Bible.
Thank you very much. Candidates, we have come to the last question, and I do apologize if we were not able to get to all of the questions from the audience today, but this is the last question, and it is one from the audience. The question is, what are the greatest differences between you and your opponent? Ms. Jensen.
Thank you for that question. I believe the biggest difference between myself and my opponent is the amount of experience and the amount of time that I've put into trying to understand the issues that impact the people that live in this district. There's a reason that I decided to join the school board, and that was because I believed all-day kindergarten was something we absolutely needed. And it's not about just thinking that you're doing that because it will give you some kind of recognition. You do that because you believe that you can make a difference, and then you act upon it because of that same reason. And that's what I've done. And the other thing is, I will be absolutely honest and absolutely forthright with what is within in these numbers. Because policy is policy and it's worded on paper, but it impacts people who live in the district, and people need to understand what that impact is. And I will do my homework and always make sure that I have their thought and their view in mind, and go and ask them all the time.
Thank you. Mr. Sweeney.
The greatest differences between us, I've worked in corporate America as a small business, working with executives around the world, mostly in the Twin Cities market. And there's a lot of big personalities, a lot of agendas, and I've focused on priding myself on leadership bias, being a good facilitator, not getting overly emotional with things, making certain that priorities are the focus, and that too many things are just simply too many things from an importance perspective, and just working with those big personalities all my life for 22 years gives me an advantage to make certain that I can help form consensus with our state leaders.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
Well, I spent 60% of my life in service. That's the key. Selfless service, giving back to the community, giving back to the organizations that you work with, that you deal with on a day-to-day, the people, giving back. It's not about what I get out of it, it's what I give back to you. I want to give back to the community. I want to give back to our state. That's the thing. It doesn't matter to me if lofty goals for people are nothing. I need, my life has been built around giving back to the people that, you know, it doesn't matter what happens to me, but it's important giving back to the people. Selfless service is number one, and that's what I'll give, and a tireless effort from day one to the time I am done to achieve the goals that we need to have come forth.
Thank you. Mr. Petersburg.
Well, for me, I believe it's a proven experience in being able to bring people together, develop a concise and ability to get people together. I'm sorry, I kind of said that over again. But to build consensus is the word I was trying to use. It's something that I've learned at church, and it's something that I've learned in my business as a farmer and dealing with all sorts of different agencies and groups and through the school board system. I have the experience and knowledge. I do not have a naive understanding of what kind of work it's going to take going up the legislature. I know firsthand how much work it's going to be. I know how much time is going to need to be spent talking with people and listening to people and learning about the issues that we have in front of us. I have that, and I believe if you talk to people who know me, you'll hear the same thing from them. I can do the job.
Thank you. We've come to that point where we are ready now for our candidates' closing 2-minute statements. I would like to thank the Owatonna Rotary Clubs for helping to sponsor this, as well as the Owatonna Area Chamber of Commerce and Tourism for their help as well. We would remind you that the taping of this particular forum, as well as the other forums that we have had, are available online at www.owatonna.com. In addition, beginning tomorrow, we will have online statements that the different candidates for different offices have made. And those statements will come from the candidates for mayor and city council, as well as for the Owatonna School Board and for the Steele County Board of Commissioners, as well as these candidates themselves. So if you haven't had enough of them, we do encourage you to go online and see their statement to you as well. So now we are ready again for our final closing statements. And Mr. Petersburg, we will begin with you.
First, I want to just again say thank you to all of you who participated in this and came out with your questions, and hopefully we answered them so that at least you know where we stand. I have spent a great deal of my life also in service. It's something that I've felt is my obligation and an opportunity for me to really give back to this community, the community that has supported me through a lot of the struggles that I've had in my life. It's an opportunity for me to really listen and to go to the state capitol and work for this particular district, as well as for the state. We have to remember we're always part of the state as well. I believe I have the skills that can get the job done. I believe I have the skills to bring people together, and as I said before, develop that consensus that's necessary for us to leave a room or leave a meeting feeling good about what we decided. We may not get everything we want, but I think there are always alternatives for us to look at so that we can come across with a concise and unified piece. I think it's time for us as a state and as a district to come together and understand that we're living together with each other. We're part of the same churches, we're part of the same communities, and we can be tolerant of each other's differences of opinions without having to be, without alienating them. So I think it's all about how can we come together as a people to solve the current economic crisis that we're at. How is it that we can really develop a relationship that is necessary for all of us? Government is usually not the answer, but you out there around the tables are. And it's up to the legislature to help us understand that and to not get in the way of people helping people. Because that's where we have our success. That's where we've always had success here in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brendan.
Well, I would like to thank also the People's Press, the Rotary here, and the Chamber for allowing us to have, being put on the spot. That's the fun part of it, I guess. It's, having to think on your feet. And that's one thing I bring to this idea, being able to think on my feet, being able to listen to the ideas, come up with a statement and an answer to the question, being able to think on your feet, talking about it. Our idea about government is taking the best ideas that everybody has. Doesn't matter to me what party you're affiliated with. I want to see what you have to say, your ideas, and let's sit down and talk about it. Kind of like our kitchen table at home. How do things go at the kitchen table? Well, I know it doesn't always work out, we don't always agree at the kitchen table, but when we get done with it, we reach a consensus of what's best for our family. What are we going to do? The same thing has to be done with our government. Reach a consensus. Take those best minds, put them together, and don't let them leave the room until they can agree that this is what's best for all of us going forward, making sure that something's going to be beneficial. It's like the Rotary motto up here. Is it the truth? Is it going to be good for all? Those are the things we look at. That's how we create an efficient system, by taking care of everybody, listening to the voices, working something together, coming up with a plan that we all can agree upon, that will be beneficial for the greater good of all the citizens of our state. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Swedin.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for moderating today. Thank you directly. Thank you all, very astute group with your great questions, and there's probably hours more. My life lessons have taught me that leadership is the key to influence for the right things. And I grew up a block layers kid, so things were pretty simple when I was a kid. And it assigned core values to my life, things that were most important to me, and I believe those core values are shared within this district. That's what makes us happy to be residents of Owatonna, Minnesota, why we love this area. Another thing that I would say is I love people. I mean, you wouldn't work in a church and do outreach and not think about the people that you want to serve. I want to put a leadership bias in place that really focuses on good paying local jobs, because that does take a lot of the pressures away in homes, making certain that people do have the economy that does support their state and their local businesses. We've got a spending problem. I want to go and be creative and have the energy that we can go in and have those long conversations and have creative solutions to those problems. And yeah, thank you for today. It was great to be here.
Thank you. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here today. And I would be happy to stay and answer some questions if one of your questions didn't get answered. I don't know if we can go in the hall or whatever. But you have a choice in this election. I hope you can hear the passion that I have about these issues. And I want to take that passion, that knowledge, and my experience to the state. Businesses and families are nervous. They're nervous because they're not sure about the future. And what they really need is stability. They want stability in their taxes, in their paychecks, and just the belief that they're going to be able to take care of their family. Because no matter where you are in your life right now, that's what you're trying to do. Whether you're a business owner, or you're working in your chosen profession, or you're looking for work, or a student, or if you're retired, you are trying to do the best you can to provide for yourself and for your family. I am so proud of the work that I've done for the past few years, especially in the city of Owatonna. I'm so proud of the public policy to make a commitment to the taxpayers in this community and to go forth and try to find things like the City Efficiency Task Force. We were able to form partnerships. We were able to find efficiencies that affected the taxpayers within that district. I'm so proud of the work that I've done on the school board representing the students and the taxpayers of the school district. I was there for the community to ask the tough questions when they needed to be asked and to continue to do what we needed to do the best thing for our kids. I would do that at the state, and I would be so proud to represent you and really work hard for you and your family. So I'm asking for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, and I will, at this point, turn it over to Dr. John Mueller-Liley.
I would like to thank our 4 brave candidates. It's not an easy thing to run for office, and we appreciate your willingness to do that. And I'd also like to thank all of you who came today to hear what they had to say. The backbone of our government is participation, and this job of learning about the issues and the candidates is so important to a good democracy. I'd also like to thank Jeffrey and the Owatonna People's Press. I would like to thank Brad and Katie from the Owatonna Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'd also like to thank the members of both Rotary clubs for hosting this. And thank you all, and I think we've said enough. Adjourned.